Well, hey everyone, welcome back to the Patreon page where we get to interview amazing church leaders, sort of in a private conversation context, and have a little fun with it, man. Today we have Esteban Valenzuela. That's right, from Madrid, Spain. I should have said Esteban. Esteban. Yeah, he's from Madrid, Spain. He came and ministered to the church missions conference Sunday. Amazing, powerful message. Just did a leadership lesson. It's been so sweet and awesome to just see God use you. And what I want to talk today about with the community I influence is just like about church planting, mission work, and really church planting in a different culture. But before we get to all of that, explain in your own words. Who are you? Where are you at? Where does the Lord have you in this season? Who are your children, your wife? And just give it a little introduction of who you are.
Calling as well?
No. Let's start
all right.
with you are.
My name is Esteban. I'm from Southern California, and met Jesus around 2001. Changed my life, changed the trajectory of my life, and went to Bible college for a bit, and met through a friend I met in Bible college. I met my wife in West Virginia. She's from West Virginia. I met her in 2004, early 2004.
Nice.
And we were engaged within a couple months of meeting each other. And it's been the best decision of my life besides following Jesus. Very cool lady. Just loves the Lord, and a huge blessing to me and so many others. And we worked together. We had our own business for 10 years. And during that time, we had 3 kids. My eldest daughter, Isabel. My man in the middle, Samuel, he's 11. And then the little one, I call her Shorty. Her name is Bristol. She's 9. And so, I'm from Southern California. My wife's from West Virginia. We lived in Southern California as a family before we launched out to Madrid, Spain.
Yeah. I guess you are right. We should probably go in a little bit of like, how did God get you from California to Madrid, Spain? But before we do that, let me ask this question, because I always ask this question to people that come in. Do you remember how we met?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We were going to a church planting intensive. And I think we were both we both have similar testimonies of God just drawing us to this church planting intensive in summer or spring of 2011, right?
Yeah.
And so, everybody was there with their kids, month-long intensive, and it was a blast. God was just all over me. That's where he showed me specifically coming to Madrid, specifically a church plant that would plant other churches, and my calling, you know what I mean? Like, that's where we focused on that the first week, and it was just epic for me.
Yeah. So talk about that. Talk about how God not only brought you to Madrid, Spain, but you may even want to say how he delivered you to Madrid, Spain.
You want to hear that story?
I do.
Yeah. So when I met Daniel, we were in the middle of probably the biggest storm of our lives. We got pregnant with our oldest daughter in 2008. And it was the financial crisis, and I was working as a real estate appraiser. I had my certification as a real estate appraiser. I have a couple of family members in the business, and so for the first 3 years of our marriage, it was a great way to make a living. I enjoyed it. Me and my wife worked together out of our house, mm-hmm. and there were so many benefits and blessings to this job, and I really, really did love the job. And so one of my clients, we had multiple clients, and one of my clients was committing mortgage fraud. And I didn't know. I was, new, green to the business, and you have to do like an apprenticeship. You have to be a trainee under another appraiser for 2,000 hours. So the first year I was working with this client, I was a trainee. I had, somebody signing off on my appraisals and reviewing my work. And then so the first full year I was appraising with my own license. That was the second year I worked with them. And then the financial crisis hit. So in 2008, when we were pregnant, I got a visit from the FBI. They came and asked me some questions. I'm like, I don't know what to say. If I can help in any way, let me know, but I don't really know anything. And I think maybe they maybe thought I was totally involved and were looking for me to just, be a snitch or whatever. But I couldn't. I just didn't have that capacity because I didn't know anything. And so fast forward to April of 2009. I'm up early this morning. I think it was the 7th of April, if I'm not mistaken, 2009. And I'm up before the sun. I'm on my computer, and boom, boom, boom. I get this bang on my door, and I open the window. I'm like, who is it? They're like, it's the police. Open the door. We're going to break it down. So that's the day my life changed. April of 2009. They arrested me and 20 something, maybe like 24, 25 other defendants under the RICO Act, the RICO statute. It's a specific law that brings harsher sentences. If you're usually going to serve a sentence for 5 years for something you did wrong, a federal crime, under the RICO Act, you'd serve 20. And it was designed to bring down organized crime like the mafia, or that's what they used it for. So this is like one of the first cases they used it for mortgage situation. And I don't know if that was in California or if that was in all of the country. But nonetheless, they arrested me, got out on bail, and I just went back to work. I had to do what I had to do, and I was working still. But I had to report to the court every month. And so this is not just a story of like God's like, leading us through a wilderness, but really a story of him preparing us for it and for the mission field, and also calling us. So the story is rather lengthy, but in the very beginning, I just was crushed. I mean, this is one of those things where, Lord, I remember being on my daughter was born 5 days later, and I remember being on the floor in her bedroom thinking, God, I can't take one more second of this. Take it away, please. And I mean, it's really that anxiety that it's eating you up alive. You wouldn't wish it on your worst enemy if you had one. And that's what it was for the beginning part of this situation. And I was crying out to God, and I began to just pray, and God began to speak this very specific verse in the Old Testament through 2 Chronicles chapter 20, 17, where God tells King Jehoshaphat, stand still. You're going to see my salvation. They had like 3 different nations that had come together, and they were coming to move in. They weren't coming just to attack. They were coming to take over completely.
Yeah.
And so this is the word God gave me. And when you're in that situation, it's like too good to be true, right? So you're like, really, God? I mean, really, tell me what's going to happen. You know what I mean? And so this went on for a long time, and God just repeated this promise. I mean, God is a God who communicates, who has fellowship with us, and who just speaks his word to us, and gives promises. So this promise was coming to us, and I couldn't believe it. And the first year of this situation, I continued to work. We were living as a family, but it was anguish. And yet God was calling or giving us this word. We found our new church home that year, a Calvary Chapel in Lake Elsinore. Just began to serve there, and God began to just stir my heart. We were fasting one day with the pastor and some other leaders, and I was on my own, and I was praying, and I was kind of like in my prayer closet type thing, and I remember praying, and it was almost as if a cloud with weight on it descended upon me. I can't explain it, but I had this vision that I was in a church worshiping Jesus, and I knew I was in Spain. It was clear in my mind. That's just the way it was. So I came out of that time, and I asked, I told my wife, and I'm like, look, I don't know what God's doing, but I think maybe we should just pray about it, pray about going to Spain. Now, mind you, I didn't even have my passport. I couldn't even leave, I couldn't go any further than San Bernardino County, which is just 2 counties away. Yeah. Because I was limited by the court, right? I was in this crazy situation still.
You were still on bail.
Yeah, still out on bail, reporting to the courts. They considered the case complex, so it went on for a while. And so I don't have my passport, and we're here talking about going to Spain, right? Pretty crazy. So we committed to just pray, her and I, between us. We weren't going to tell anybody. We're just going to pray and see what God would do. And my prayer was, God, confirm it through your word and make it inescapable. And so for a year, I cannot tell you the things that happened, the way that people brought up Spain, the scriptures that came up that were just pointing us to Spain. It was obvious. My wife had become the director of the children's ministry at our church by that point. And so we shared it with my pastor. He was supportive, and my pastor actually believed that God was going to deliver us before I ever did. You know, I shared these verses with him, and he was like, "Dude, that's awesome." And I mean, he had a grin from one ear to the other because he believed it. And so we shared the vision for going to Spain, and then, you know, later on when I met you, God kind of brought that vision into focus, a little more detailed. But we were still in this case. Had my son during this time. Mm-hmm. He was born in December of 2011. So to kind of make a long story short, things seemed to get worse. And a lot of people had pled guilty. So they focused down on everybody that was left, and they did what's called a superseding indictment. So where the first indictment may have been general, this one was like this is what we think you did. So I just stood still. The third year was the year I literally trusted God. I thought, okay, I don't know, God. I don't know how you're going to do it. I'm not going to guess anymore. I'm not going to sweat it. I'm not going to be constantly thinking about how and when you're going to do it. I'm just going to trust you're going to do it. I'm going to march in victory. And God did so many cool things, confirming it through his word. There was even a song that was all about 2 Chronicles chapter 17. And God gave us this anthem to march to. It was a brand new song that came out during that time. And so I was, God was giving me opportunities to serve in the church, to begin to teach and to, you know, teach Bible study. And I stepped in for my buddy, who's an assistant pastor at the time. He was the leader of the young adults. Him and his wife were going to take a night off, and so they asked me to step in, and I did. Mm-hmm. So I was there early. I was waiting for the gathering to start, and I got an email from my attorney, which he never emailed me after hours, and his assistant always called me. He emailed me saying, "Hey, email me your phone number." So, okay, do I really want to talk to him? I was already nervous. I was just kind of already, you know, barely getting into Bible teaching. I was already nervous to teach this young adults group. So I'm like, do I want to add this stress to my night? Anyway, he called, and he's like, "I have good news for you. They dismissed the charges. All the charges are gone." So from 1 minute to the other, I was kind of a free man. But the toll that it took, we suffered some PTSD that was pretty serious, and that's another story, but it has been part of our story. You know, it's something that God allowed. And really, this was all preparation and for the future. And what God did in my heart is he just crushed me, allowed me to be crushed, and showed me Jesus. You know, He brought me back to the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus and the gospel. And he just... that made it all worth it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So that's kind of a summary of that calling, and a pretty intense kind of experience that we had, you know, and maybe even unique for people that go out to the mission field, you know?
Yeah. But I think that is important. And one of the reasons I want to bring that up is, one, it's an awesome story. You got arrested by the FBI. I mean, looking back at it, it's awesome. Obviously, it's dramatic.
I think they have like a 98 point something conviction rate in that region. So
yeah, and weren't you telling me what struck me is, what was the conversation you had with Tiffany, your wife, saying, real conversation, I may be going to jail? Yeah. So my little infant daughter was in the stroller, and we were taking a walk around our neighborhood. You know, probably within the first weeks of this happened, maybe the first 2 weeks, and I told my wife, I said, "Look, we might have to prepare ourselves for the reality of me going to jail." And I mean, you never think that, right? You never think that that's going to happen to you. You never think you're going to see documents that say the United States of America versus Esteban Valenzuela. You know what I mean? Oh my God.
So it's like, you never would even dream these things would happen. So I'm trying to process it all. Yeah. And it's nothing but anxiety for me and fear. And I had to have this frank conversation with my wife, and she probably would remember it too.
Yeah, it's nuts. But, you know, I think when we think about calling or even church planning, right? And God, how we prepare versus how God prepares. Right now, there's a lot of popularity in the prospectus and, you know, fundraising and geographic location and all the preparing.
Launch team.
And I'm not saying those things are bad. But let's talk a little bit about how God prepared you in the wilderness. Why would you never take that back? How important was that almost 40 months of being arrested, being on bail, going through suffering? How did that prepare you for church planning in a way where if someone gave you $50,000, it would not prepare you?
Yeah. I mean, this life that we have with the Lord, we are called to live by faith. And I think that we can be convinced that, I have faith. And I knew Jesus at that point for at least 7, 8 years. So if you would have asked me, are you a man of faith? I could have looked you in the eye and with conviction said yes, but through that trial, God also gave me another vision at one point, and it was a vision of my heart. And it's kind of interesting. I was in a chamber of my heart, and I was pinned to the wall because there was a big stone in that chamber of my heart. And I knew that it represented unbelief, and so, God was dealing with me in that, my unbelief, and showing me, teaching me, training me to have faith, but it was the spiritual work that God did in me during that time, baptizing me in his spirit at a men's conference in Calvary Chapel, Chino Valley, and really just bringing me into that rest that you find in Jesus. I didn't understand it. The rest of God is something that's literally spiritually discerned and taught by the Lord, you to get it. And he revealed it to me, and one time during this season, I got a letter from the state of California saying that somebody had taken action against my real estate appraiser's license. I was barely surviving. I think at this point I was actually having some faith, and I began to have a little bit of joy. Got this letter, and we couldn't pay our mortgage at the time, so it was just like this wave of a flood that came in. So I set myself to pray and fast. I'm like, with vigor, I was like, I'm gonna fast. I need some answers. I need help, God. Me and my wife got on the floor, and we put those documents on the floor, and we prayed, and God gave her a word. Said, look, it's not by power, not by might, but by my spirit, declares the Lord of hosts, and we know the context of that verse, and that was a perfect application for us at the moment. Anyway, I fasted for a good amount of time, and God just gave me the grace to do it, but he didn't give me answers for that letter or our mortgage situation. What he did was he took me through Luke 24, the things that happened after the resurrection, the empty tomb, him coming to the men on the road to Emmaus, opening their hearts, showing them himself through the law and the prophets, and then this other group, he does the same. He just reveals himself to them through all these things in the Old Testament. He could have done this before, but he was just doing something special. And that's what he was doing, man. He was just like unlocking my heart and just revealing himself to me, and it was just real, that Jesus is reality.
Yeah.
And it changed my life. And I came out of that time with that. And that's what I would do it all over again for that, because that has been my constant anchor in life, in marriage, in everything, in church planting, this work of Jesus, him showing himself, and being real.
So how, in your own words, would you put faith as so important when it comes to church planting? How does that affect everything you do, even up until now, planting a church in a foreign country, in the middle of a city with millions of people? Where does faith play a role in church planting and in your life?
Yeah. I mean, the heart is like water. The water wants to go the path of least resistance, and the path of least resistance is not the path of faith. The path of least resistance for our hearts is the path where I can see things, where I feel like I'm in control, and I can make next steps, informed. But, when it comes to church planting, and everybody's situation may be a little bit different depending on where you're planting, whether it's in your country, outside of your country.
Yeah.
But, I don't see myself as some dynamic person, very charismatic. When we went out, my confidence was not in me. It was in God's word, and that the Holy Spirit could work. That's it. I didn't have any real confidence in myself. I didn't have too much experience, really no experience in pastoral ministry, and never planted a church. So for us, it's crazy because God gave my wife faith, right? With the FBI, I said, look, honey, this is what God is telling me. And she began to believe it, and I began to believe it, and finally it happened, right?
Yeah.
And then God called us to Spain, and it was like something that God was speaking, and it's like she believed it, I believed it, and then it happened, right? So it was like, I think it gave her confidence. Look, my husband is hearing from God. You know what I mean? So it definitely took faith on her part, but for me, it was a faith it was a step of faith every step of the way, you know? From just saying, okay, we're going to start meeting on Sundays at this language school. 4 or 5 of us, really uncomfortable. I felt so uncomfortable for the people. I felt bad for them, you know. And at times we had 15 people in that room, and I still felt bad for them.
Yeah,
I was just so uncomfortable. But it's taken faith, because you sometimes really, like I said, you sow in tears, and you're desperate, and you pray, and you know God has called you to it, but you can't make it happen. You know, just like I can't produce change in anybody, you know, I can't make certain things happen. And we didn't have resources. And so we were just faced with taking this little budget we had and renting a place for 100 euros a week. And every step of the way, it's been faith, you know, faith to believe and have confidence that God's gonna, you know, get us the next step. And now, you know, we're at the place where the church has grown. We've got some other leaders, and we're seeing God make happen what he promised would happen. You know what I mean? So it's like, so when it comes to this church planting other churches, which was the vision God gave us, I have every reason to believe that God's going to do it. You know what I mean? Because I'm looking back at all these fulfilled promises. God spoke and God did it, you know? But faith is, to say it's essential is an understatement. You know what I mean? You need to have your eyes on Jesus, let him be your anchor, your foundation, your cornerstone, and try not to just be an idiot. You know what I mean?
Yep. Well, let me ask you this. What have been some unique challenges that you faced planning a church on a mission field or a foreign culture for you? You grew up in California. You spoke a little Spanish. Your wife spoke none. And so you're not on the mission field now, a unique country, different from your own. What are some unique challenges that people may not even think about, or that you faced on top of the difficulty of just planning a church? Like, how do you plan a church globally? Yeah.
Paperwork, bureaucracy in another country. I love Spain, and I'm getting used to the rhythm and the flow of the city, of the those types of things, you know, this bureaucracy. But, you know, those things can make it kind of challenging when you need to establish a church and open like a nonprofit or something like that. You know, we had a Christian lawyer who's the son of like one of the main guys for the Assemblies of God in Spain. He's a solid guy, so he's familiar with all these things. He gives, you know, a lot of help to churches. So it was a blessing to have him. You know, once we were able to, you know, utilize him. But, you know, that was a bit challenging. We got our own building, and we had to make some changes in the building. The architect said, in order to get a license, to get an activity license. So this was happening all during COVID, right after the quarantine. So everything was just like, can we meet? Can we not meet? I don't know. Should we do this? I don't know. And the modifications we made to the building, they were quite significant in money. You know what I mean? So we didn't have money. Everything was just like, okay, God, here you go. This is what we need. We have a building. You know, I want to do things right. And, you know, it required faith and, you know, another step. So I would say, like, you know, those processes of paperwork and things is something that maybe you don't expect, or you think, okay, well, I'm going to have to do it, but it's always kind of unknown until you actually do it, you know? And another thing that I experienced on the mission field while planning this church, you know, is discovering or navigating when am I to launch this thing, right? And between the time we got there to the time that we planted, I connected with certain people, and they're like, oh, we want you to disciple this group of believers. They don't have a pastor, or, you know, let's do this or let's do that. And there was a small handful of pastors and leaders who were almost manipulative in how they handled me. And really, I was really desperate for a relationship and just wanted to see if God would open a door here or there, you know what I mean? And then be connected with other people. And that was one of the shocking things that made me just kind of recoil and made me think, no, like I don't want to speak. I don't want to go down any other door, any other avenue. I just want to do what you called us to do, Lord. You know what I mean? Because I feel like I got burned by some people, and I never expected that, especially Christians. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it can be a bit challenging, in certain ways. And another way is depression. I think we all kind of have gone through our moments of depression. My wife, myself, my kids, and other missionaries that have worked with us. And it's real. The spiritual battle is real. And and so we've navigated through it. I remember at the church planting intensive that we went to, I think one of the ladies that was telling the other ladies that, look, you guys are going to each feel like you want to get out of there. Just pray that it doesn't happen to all of you at the same time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, those are just a few of the things that I can think of, at the top of my head.
Yeah. The one thing I think that's very unique, and I've experienced it moving and being a parachute plant, is just isolation. One thing you mentioned, you long for relationship. How important is it to be relationally connected when you plant a church? How important was it for you, especially not just as a fellow church planter and relate to that way, but actually like on a different country? How important have relationships served you and helped you in planting this church?
Yeah. I know God allows things, and he prescribes certain seasons of our lives, you know what I mean? And I think that, as a couple, we felt very alone and disconnected from fellowship here in the States, things that I longed for, a sense of witness that I was just longing for, to say, hey, we see you, we believe in you, and we want to walk this road with you. You know what I mean? So there was a lack of that, and for whatever reason, God allowed it.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other side, we did serve with an Assemblies of God church for close to a year. My wife always says, when I tell this story, it wasn't a year. I always thought it was about a year that we served with them. But we served in their church, and the pastor welcomed us, and he was a really cool guy. And that church has been absolutely essential in us getting our visas renewed several times. When a church helps you get a visa, a religious visa, you can't work. But they take responsibility for you. So they did that for us. They did that for our other missionary, Candace, to renew her visa. And they invited, who is now my assistant pastor, and his wife from Mexico. So they've done this for us so many times. And it's just been this huge blessing that I just can't even thank them enough for. You know what I mean? But that relationship, that connection, we saw each other. We got to know each other through working on the Red Box, the evangelism ministry. We saw each other at the church that we served at. And so that relationship just bore so much fruit, and I'm really thankful for them.
Yeah, it is a blessing to have people that come alongside of you to be able to help and stuff like that. What would you tell us that are even listening, like, how are ways that we can get involved in your ministry and what you're doing? And even if not you, but just someone that's planning a church on the foreign field, what's some encouragement or advice, wisdom you can give us to serve those people that are going out well?
Pray for friends like Pastor Daniel, who genuinely have a passion for church planting, who genuinely love people. And having you as an advocate and as a friend has been unbelievably, a blessing. Beyond that, I asked the guy this same thing, this guy who's been in Europe for a long time. And I wanted some nuggets of wisdom. And he said one thing. He said, just pray. And while I think that was a little bit cheeky for him to say, a little bit, I don't know. But anyway, I understand why he said that, you know what I mean? Because everything that you do, you just have to pray, you know what I mean? But I would say, like, an encouragement is try to maintain some healthy connections with leaders and people that can have some accountability with you. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And people that can kind of say, hey, how are you doing personally? How's your walk with Jesus? How's your marriage? How are your kids? You know what I mean? Don't let those things be neglected. You know what I mean? The marriage, I think, is such an important part. If you're married and if you go out in the field that way, and if you have kids, which it's pretty common that happens, no?
Yeah.
Just don't neglect those things, and, take date nights and protect your marriage and continue to invest, and I think that would also include other people just, being there for you. You know what I mean? Because you kind of get in this echo chamber of your own thoughts, your own words, your own ministry, and you're isolated. You just need to talk with people sometimes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Some people are natural at reaching out. Other people are not. And so oftentimes in a marriage, you get one of each. You know what I mean? So, it's good to just be able to put that into practice. And, God's going to provide.
Yeah.
Just try to move into that place of confidence in the Lord. Lord, I don't see what's around the corner, but I'm convinced that you've called us, and I'm convinced that you'll provide. And obviously calling is important. I would say that, and I'm sure you would agree.
Absolutely. Man, just to finish this with encouragement, to hear about how God is working in a different country for most people listening to this, what are you excited for? For this next year, what are you encouraged by, excited for? Just the work that you've done. I know you just celebrated 5 years, your church plant. You've ordained a pastor. You have some co-laborers now. What are something you're looking forward to and seeing how Jesus is working in Madrid, Spain?
Yeah. My prayer has been, Lord, open a door for the gospel. And my other prayer has been, bring the harvest to us, or send us to the harvest, or bring the harvest to us. And so I believe he's going to answer that prayer. And that makes me excited, because I know that it's been my prayer for a long time, and I know he's going to answer that. When we were praying for a building, I just had this picture. I felt like we were like in a forest, and I'm just like, Lord, like clear out a place, remove the trees, and give us an outpost. Give us an outpost in the city. And he did that. Like, he answered my prayer, God is amazing.
Yep.
And he hears, right? So I just believe that he's going to answer those prayers, and that he's going to open more doors for the gospel and send us to the harvest and bring the harvest to us. And I'm excited that people are inviting people to church, and there's people that are finding us that aren't believers, and they're getting saved. And I'm excited about that, and I'm just confident in the Lord, and I'm excited to see what are the other leaders that he'll raise. Who are the other leaders that he'll raise up?
Yeah.
And then beyond that, we're hoping to take a sabbatical from around May to the end of August. That's a big step of faith. I mean, even my wife was saying today, like, it's going to be tough because I love these people, and I agree. I'm excited for it, not because it's time off, but I just think there needs to be some healing. One of the pastors that recommended this for us, highly recommended it. He said he went through a mental breakdown, and he just waited way too long, and he had to take a sabbatical. And, you've mentioned, well, sometimes people take those because there's been this or that, some kind of tragic thing in the family happening. And it's got nothing to do with that. I think we're just, worn down, and mentally and emotionally, we just need to unplug. So I'm excited for some restoration, for some strengthening, about, like how God says, those who wait upon the Lord, they'll renew their strength. And so
Yeah.
I'm excited for renewed strength, and I'm looking forward to that. And however God's going to do that, I'm just trying not to get busy. You know what I mean? Like, I want to visit people on our sabbatical, but I just want to find the balance and say, okay, God, what do you want us to do? What do you not want us to do? You know what I mean? But I am excited about that. And that gives me excitement for the future, for the fall, and other churches visiting us, other churches who one wants to plant like a church, a pastor's training campus of some sort. And so that's like right up our alley, right? Because that's what we have a desire to do, to plant other churches. So I'm excited to see how God will fulfill that calling, and which will be the next domino that falls, so to speak, which will be the next person that goes out to plant, or however that looks, you know what I mean? So yeah, I'm excited for those things.
That's awesome. Well, guys, I just wanted to introduce you to Esteban and the ministry and the work that he's doing. Same call on plant a church. I plant churches. Church planting is definitely on my heart, something I love, and not just even in the States, but around the world. And it's so cool to have like-minded brothers. And I love your heart, even in this interview. We could definitely get into a lot of the practicals. We do that often. We have done that. But I think the most practical thing when you're planting a church is just keeping it all about Jesus.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like doing it as unto the Lord, as an act of worship. And we need people to remind us of that. And your story is so unique. You were so desperate. It built your faith, and God did something that only he can do because you were desperate. I wanted to have him share that with us, because we need to be desperate. We need to depend on the Holy Spirit, not our works, on the things of the flesh, but to be encouraged that as we build churches and plant churches and serve the Lord, man, we could do a whole bunch of labor, but if the Lord doesn't do it, we labor in vain, the words God says.
Yeah.
And so you're just a living testimony of that. And I'll put all of his information in the description. So if you want to reach out with him, email, maybe go visit in Madrid, Spain, help plant more churches, just not even the U.S., but globally. And that I'll make sure you guys can hook up and get to know him. Is there any last words of encouragement or anything you want to say before we just go grab some lunch together?
Yeah. Everybody's story is different. And I think that me comparing myself, it's probably something that every pastor does, comparing your ministry with another ministry. Don't do that. Don't fall into that trap.
Yeah.
But everybody has kind of like an origin story. Like, this is the way it happened. This is the way God planted this church. He did all these miracles. He did things this way. And you can kind of get bummed like, I don't see that happening here. You know what I mean? When is this going to happen? Well, look, let the Lord write your story. He's called you to live by faith in Jesus every day. And that's something that's very practical and very real that we need to do. And don't just assume he's going to do this A, B, or C. It could be X, Y, Z, or another combination of ways that God does it. You know what I mean? And so, for us, there's been great victories, but I've personally sowed in tears, throughout a lot of this season. But I'm looking forward to, reaping with joy, you know, and coming in with those sheaves and just seeing what God's going to do. So. Yeah, I guess that's what I would share to kind of end this time. However your origin story is, let the Lord write it.
Awesome. Well, he who began a good work is faithful to complete it. God bless you guys. And I'll make sure that we continue to put forth amazing leaders like this in front of you so we can learn and we can grow together.
God bless you guys.